Imagine that one morning you accidentally find photos on your husband's phone that change your life forever. What would you do if the person you've spent 20 years with turns out to be someone completely different from who you thought he was? Today, you'll hear the story of a woman who faced betrayal but found the strength to start over. Should you stay or leave? Forgive or let go? Listen until the end. Perhaps this story will help you find answers to the most difficult questions. An innocent affair. Evelyn and Jackson met when they both started university. She was a modest but determined girl from an educated family. He was a charming and cheerful guy from a small town. Their meeting happened by chance. In their first year, they ended up in the same group, and from the very first days, a light, almost invisible but very warm connection formed between them. Evelyn immediately noticed Jackson. He knew how to joke, was always ready to help, and his sincere smile won her over at first sight. At first, they were just friends, studying for exams together, going to student parties, discussing books and movies. Jackson often walked Evelyn home, and she eagerly awaited these walks. Gradually, their friendship grew into something more. Jackson was the first to confess his feelings, and although Evelyn was a bit shy, she reciprocated. Their relationship developed quickly but without unnecessary drama. They knew how to compromise, support each other, celebrate successes, and get through tough times together. After graduating, they got married. The young couple rented a small house, and their adult life began. Jackson got a job as an engineer at a large company, and Evelyn became an accountant at a small firm. Money was tight, but they were happy. Together, they built their home, dreamed about the future, and made plans. A couple of years later, their daughter was born, and this event brought true happiness to both of them. Evelyn always tried to be a support and pillar for her husband. She grew up in a family where traditions, respect, and care for each other were valued. Her mother taught her from childhood that a wife is the heart of the family, and that harmony at home depends on the woman. Evelyn tried to follow this advice. She didn't start arguments, knew how to smooth over rough edges, and was always attentive to her husband and daughter. Jackson, in turn, was a reliable and caring husband, worked hard to provide for the family, and always found time for his wife and child. Years passed. The family moved into a new home of their own. Their daughter grew up, went to university, and later got married herself. Soon Evelyn and Jackson became grandparents, which marked a new stage in their lives. Everything seemed to be going as it should. Work, home, family celebrations, trips, and gatherings with friends. Evelyn was sure their marriage was strong and reliable, and Jackson was the man she was ready to spend her whole life with. But it was during this period, when everything seemed under control, that fate prepared a difficult test for Evelyn. A test that turned her whole life upside down. It all happened unexpectedly. Evelyn suspected nothing and completely trusted her husband. 6 months of deception from Jackson, and not a single slip, but it had to end. And here's how it happened. That evening, Evelyn was in the kitchen reheating dinner, knowing Jackson would be home soon. She always got home from work a little earlier than he did. Jackson arrived in a good mood, though it was slightly clouded by the fact that he would have to lie to his wife again. His conscience didn't seem to bother him. He just needed to come up with another excuse. "Evelyn, I'm home," he called out, taking off his jacket in the hallway. "Hi, wash your hands and come to the table. We're having lasagna tonight," Evelyn replied. Jackson was 46, in his prime, and apparently a midlife crisis had hit him so hard that he couldn't forget Sarah even at home. After washing his hands, he sat down at the table and eagerly started eating lasagna, not looking his wife in the eye, and said, "I'm in a hurry, Evelyn. I need to have dinner and go back to work. We have an emergency. Arthur can't handle it without me. They delivered new materials. I need to go help him out." But you just got home from work. Can't they manage without you? Evelyn was surprised. No, they can't, and I might have to stay overnight. Yes, that's probably how it'll be. He lied, and his wife took it at face value. Jackson, since when have you become so responsible? You used to be reluctant to go to work. Did they promise you a raise or a bonus? There's more work, but you're bringing home less and less money lately. Jackson almost choked. Nearly half his salary was going to Sarah on cafes gifts. A woman needs to be entertained too, even if she's married. Their relationship had already lasted 6 months. He wondered how Sarah managed to explain things to her husband. What did she come up with? It must be hard for both of them to deceive their families, Jackson thought. Yes, Evelyn, my salary was cut a bit, but it's temporary, we just need to wait, things will get better. He tried to explain. Maybe you should find a better paying job? Sometimes we need to help our daughter too. She just had a baby. My job is good, Evelyn. I told you it's temporary, he replied, already irritated. He glanced at the clock. He was supposed to meet Sarah at 8. It was easier for her. Her husband Arthur worked as a security guard and was away for 24-hour shifts, so she didn't have to make up as many excuses, sometimes just a little lie, but so far everything was smooth. That's why Jackson would go to her place, and they'd have a good time, maybe even spend the night. She wasn't even shy about the neighbors anymore, meeting Jackson at her place. Not always, but sometimes, like tonight. Sarah didn't love her husband. It was her second marriage, and she and Arthur had been together for about 8 years. At first, everything seemed fine, but she didn't like that he was just a security guard. She wanted a man with more status, with a car. That's why she got involved with Jackson, even though he was just an engineer with limited finances. But he earned much more than her husband and sometimes gave her gifts, even if they weren't expensive. Jackson worked at a large company. They met by chance at a mutual friend's birthday party, where they were both with their spouses. They spent the whole evening exchanging glances, dancing, and then continued to communicate. Their meetings were always filled with a special thrill. The kind of feeling when your heart skips a beat from the anticipation of something forbidden and sweet. Jackson and Sarah could turn even the most ordinary places into little islands of carefreeness, where they could forget about family worries and routine for a while. Most often, they met in cozy coffee shops on the outskirts of the city. There, at a table by the window, they would chat about trivial things, laugh at silly stories from life, discuss movies, and share funny observations. Sarah would order a cinnamon cappuccino, Jackson a strong black coffee. Sometimes they would deliberately swap cups to tease each other. Sarah would grimace at the bitterness, and Jackson would pretend he couldn't drink something so sweet. They walked in the park, had mini picnics on a bench with hot buns from a nearby bakery. Sarah might suddenly start spinning around, and Jackson, laughing, would catch her and pull her close to whisper another joke. There were also more private meetings, at Sarah's apartment when her husband was on shift. There they would cook dinner together, watch comedies, dance to music from a phone. Sarah loved to light candles and turn off the lights, filling the room with a soft, warm glow. Jackson would bring her little gifts, a chocolate bar, a card, sometimes a small bouquet of wildflowers. "You're like spring," he joked. "Everything gets brighter with you." Their relationship was light and playful. They made up funny nicknames for each other, competed to see who would spot something unusual on the street first, played pranks. Sarah might draw a silly face on Jackson's hand, and he would hide her gloves, only to ceremoniously find and return them later. Together they forgot about problems, about the obligations, worries, and family routine outside their little world. In those stolen hours, they were just two adults who managed to escape boredom and create their own little celebration. But there was no love between them. Their relationship was more of an escape, a way to break out of the usual circle, to feel young, carefree, and needed by someone outside the home. They were both married and each returned to their family, their responsibilities, their usual life. Their meetings were a light game, a temporary escape that promised nothing more. And it was this lightness and lack of serious feelings that made their relationship so simple and carefree. That evening Jackson left, and Evelyn washed the dishes and buried herself in her laptop, then fell asleep. She heard her husband come home, looked at the clock. It was almost 6 in the morning. It was Saturday, so he went to bed and she dozed off too. Evelyn got up at 8, shower, breakfast. She was a wonderful wife, caring and kind, which is why she and Jackson had been together for almost 23 years. Evelyn often remembered her mother's words. "Marriage is something you must approach very seriously, my daughter. The most important task for a woman is to marry wisely, because not only your happiness depends on it, but also the happiness of your husband and future children." "Oh, Mom, you make it sound so serious. Everyone just lives their lives and doesn't overthink it," Evelyn would laugh. "No, Evelyn, I'm telling you simple truths. A wife is the heart of the family, and harmony at home depends on her. She is the keeper of the hearth. Only a woman can create comfort and warmth in the family." "Thank you, Mom. I'll listen to your advice. Who else but you can teach me the rules of family life?" And Evelyn did listen. In truth, everything in the family depended on her. She wasn't quarrelsome. She knew how to smooth over sharp corners. Jackson loved his wife. He was completely satisfied with their family life. But then there was this obsession, Sarah. Was it love, or just a craving for excitement? His friends didn't support him. On the contrary, Noah, the IT guy, warned him. "Jackson, Evelyn doesn't deserve such betrayal from you. She's a great wife, you won't find many like her. End it with Sarah before it's too late. You'll regret it, and if your wife finds out, Evelyn will never forgive you." "Noah, how would Evelyn ever find out? And I like being with Sarah. She's 10 years younger than me, it's really exciting." "I warned you and I don't support you," his friend insisted. That morning, as Evelyn was finishing her coffee, a message came to her husband's phone, which he had carelessly and unusually left on the table. He usually always kept it with him. She hesitantly opened it and saw a photo. At first, she didn't understand what it was. Her Jackson in bed with another woman. There was more than one photo, and the message read, "Jackson, meet my wife, she's yours now. I installed a camera and you were caught right away. I kicked her out." It turned out that Sarah's husband, Arthur, had suspected something for a long time. He noticed changes in his wife's behavior. Her sudden delays, frequent texts, her distractedness, and even a special mood when she came home. At first, he tried to ignore it, blaming it on tiredness and work. But the inner anxiety wouldn't go away. A couple of times Arthur tried to talk to Sarah, but she brushed him off, assuring him everything was fine. So he decided to act differently. During one of his night shifts, he installed a hidden camera in their apartment. Not out of revenge, but to finally learn the truth and stop torturing himself with suspicions. The evidence didn't take long to appear. Within a few days, he saw Jackson in their apartment on the footage. At first, Arthur couldn't believe his eyes. Everything looked so casual and easy, as if it wasn't cheating, just old friends meeting. But then there was no doubt. There were hugs, kisses, and that same playful atmosphere that Sarah hadn't brought home in a long time. That night, when everything became clear, Arthur didn't make a scene. He waited for Sarah to come home and calmly showed her the video. Then he forwarded the photos to Jackson and sent the message that Evelyn read. Evelyn didn't understand at first. She looked at the shameful photos again and fell into a stupor. After a while, she finally realized what was going on, woke her husband and shoved his phone in his face. What, Evelyn, who's calling? What is it? He asked, half asleep. Look and you'll understand, she said, and in tears left the room, opened the closet and started throwing out his things. Grabbing a suitcase, Evelyn stuffed his things into it as best she could and put it in the hallway by the door. Evelyn, you misunderstood. Evelyn, please listen to me. What's there to understand? There's nothing to understand. Everything is clear. That's where half your salary goes. You need to buy gifts and that's your night shift. Get out. I don't want to see you anymore. It's disgusting. I'm not going to forgive you. Don't even ask. I won't. Jackson stalled for time, got ready, and standing in the kitchen doorway, still hoping for something, said, Evelyn, forgive me. I lost my head. Evelyn, it was just a fling. Let's agree it was an innocent affair. It happens to men. He was interrupted by a phone call. Jackson, Arthur kicked me out. Turns out he recently installed a camera. It's all the neighbors, they told him, the ones across the hall. I've been at odds with them for a long time. Jackson, I'm coming to you. I have nowhere else to go, no relatives in this city, and my friend scolded me, said, you deserved it. No, don't come here. Don't. Evelyn realized it was his lover. Is she really going to show up here? That would be the height of insolence, and She didn't have time to finish as the doorbell rang. Jackson opened the door automatically and froze. Standing on the threshold was Sarah with a suitcase and a large bag, and a bruise under her eye. Jackson grabbed his suitcase and left, slamming the door behind him. Evelyn was left alone in the apartment. She stood in the kitchen by the window and watched as her husband helped load Sarah's suitcase and bag into the trunk, then threw in his own, and they drove away. At that moment, Evelyn's life seemed to collapse. She cried, sobbed, took calming drops. Only after about 40 minutes did she manage to calm down a little. Then anger at herself replaced the tears. Why was she crying so much? He wasn't worth her tears and suffering. Yes, she hadn't expected betrayal from her husband, but it was better to find out right away than to live in ignorance. It would have come out sooner or later anyway. And he called it an innocent affair. No, Jackson, there's no such thing as an innocent affair. There's only betrayal, she told herself. She was even glad it was Saturday and she didn't have to go to work. She had time to think everything over and decide how to live on. The first weeks after Jackson left felt like a fog for Evelyn. She lived on autopilot. Getting up in the morning, making breakfast, cleaning the apartment, but it was as if someone else was doing it all, not her. Inside, she felt empty and cold. Sometimes she caught herself waiting. Any moment now the door would slam, and Jackson would walk in as before, say something ordinary, and everything would go back to the way it was. But that never happened. First, Evelyn avoided people. She didn't answer calls from friends, didn't visit her daughter, and didn't go outside unless she had to. It seemed to her that everyone around knew what had happened, that they looked at her with pity or judgment. She cried a lot at night, and during the day she tried to hold herself together, not wanting to show weakness even to herself. Gradually the pain began to dull. One morning, waking up, Evelyn suddenly realized that she hadn't thought about Jackson all night. It was a small victory. She decided it was time to return to life. Not for someone else, but for herself. First, she forced herself to go for a walk. It was hard. She felt as if every passerby could see her pain. But the fresh air, the sun, the city's noise helped distract her. Evelyn started walking every day, noticing how nature changed, how children played in the yard, how strangers smiled. Then she called her daughter and agreed to visit. Her granddaughter greeted her with a joyful squeal, hugged her tightly, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt warmth. At the family dinner, she laughed, listened to her daughter's stories, and suddenly realized that life was going on. Gradually, Evelyn began to return to her hobbies. She took out old paints and brushes she had once abandoned and tried painting again. At first it was awkward, but with each day her paintings became brighter. She signed up for English classes to keep her mind busy and met interesting people there. Evelyn also started reconnecting with her friends. At first cautiously, then more openly. She realized she wasn't alone, that there were people ready to support her, listen, just be there. Together they went to the movies, had tea and pie get-togethers, discussed books and shared news. Time passed and Evelyn thought less and less about the betrayal. She learned to forgive, both Jackson and herself. She realized she wasn't to blame for his choices, that she didn't have to save their marriage at any cost. She learned to enjoy life again. The morning sun, her daughter's call, her granddaughter's smile, new meetings and discoveries. Gradually, hope returned to her soul. Evelyn realized she was stronger than she thought, and that many happy days still lay ahead. Jackson and Sarah continued living in the rented apartment. At first, it seemed like everything was as usual, but gradually the romance faded, replaced by routine. The apartment was small and unfamiliar. Jackson, used to the comfort and order Evelyn had created, now had to take care of things himself. Sarah wasn't in a hurry to turn the new place into a home either. She often stayed late at work, came home tired and irritable. Instead of the lightness and fun that had filled their secret meetings, their relationship was now more often marked by fatigue and irritation. Jackson began to notice that Sarah wasn't as cheerful as she had seemed before. She could flare up over nothing, get offended by an innocent joke, or sit in silence for a long time, glued to her phone. Sarah, in turn, saw that Jackson had become withdrawn, often lost in thought, no longer showing the initiative he once had. Over time, Jackson started staying late at work, and Sarah complained more and more about being tired and bored. Their conversations boiled down to bills, work, and household chores. The former playfulness was gone. Sometimes in the evenings, Sarah would start to cry. She said she hadn't expected this kind of life, that she missed stability, that she longed for the past despite all the grievances. Jackson tried to comfort her but felt himself longing more and more for home, for the familiar routine, for Evelyn. He remembered how Evelyn could support him, how their home was always warm and peaceful. Arguments became more frequent. Sarah accused Jackson of indifference. Jackson accused Sarah of being cold. One day Sarah said, "We were only happy when everything was forbidden. Now we're just strangers." Soon after, Sarah packed her things and left. She rented a separate apartment, leaving Jackson without a note or explanation. Jackson was left alone in the empty rented apartment, surrounded by strange walls and memories of how things could have been different. He realized their affair had been just an illusion, an attempt to escape boredom and problems, but real life together hadn't worked out. Everything that had seemed light and bright crumbled when the secrecy disappeared and everyday life set in. After Sarah left, Jackson tried to fill the emptiness with work, TV, and the occasional meeting with colleagues, but the loneliness was especially acute in the evenings. There was no comfort, no warmth, not even the familiar little things that once seemed insignificant but now felt unbearably important. He found himself thinking about Evelyn more and more. Memories of their life together surfaced. How she greeted him from work, how she cared for him, how she could support him in difficult times. Jackson remembered her gentle voice, her kind smile, her habit of leaving him notes with reminders and wishes for a good day. He realized he had taken it all for granted, never valued it, never noticed it, and now it was gone forever. With each passing day, the desire to talk to Evelyn grew stronger. Jackson called her several times, but she didn't answer. He sent her short messages, first with apologies, then just asking how she was, how their daughter and granddaughter were. There was no reply. It was as if Evelyn had disappeared from his life, and that brought Jackson a new, special kind of pain. He began to understand that he had lost not only his wife but also himself. Everything that had seemed important and desirable turned out to be empty and fleeting. Jackson tried to find excuses for his actions, but more and more often he caught himself thinking that he was the only one to blame. In the evenings he sat in the dark, staring at his phone, waiting for Evelyn to answer. But the silence only grew deeper. Jackson realized. Sometimes there is no forgiveness, and the past cannot be returned, no matter how much you want it. Time passed. Evelyn learned to live without Jackson and filed for divorce. But as soon as he found out about the upcoming divorce, he immediately rushed to her, calling first. "Evelyn, I'm downstairs, can I come up? Please just listen to me." "All right, I'll listen," she replied. When she opened the door, Jackson stood there, dejected, not himself, looking worn out. "Evelyn, I'm begging you, let's not get divorced. After all, we've spent so many years together, we have a daughter, a granddaughter. Please. I'm not going to live with Sarah, she's completely different, she just keeps demanding and demanding, and we're living in a rented apartment. I understand the apartment is yours, your grandmother's, she was wise to make it a gift to you. I never thought I'd end up in such an awkward position. Even my friends judge me and don't understand. Evelyn, I love you very much. I realize that I only love you. Let's start over with a clean slate." "You say a clean slate? And what about the betrayal, my pain and humiliation? I lived for you and our daughter, and now I live without you. And you know what? I'm managing and I don't believe you love me anymore. Is it just that you have nowhere else to go? Evelyn, forgive me, I swear. I love only you and I promise." "No, Jackson, the most valuable and sincere thing in life isn't I love you, but simply, I'm with you. I was always with you when you were sick, when you had big problems, when you were in the hospital after the accident, when you learned to walk again. You took your first steps when I was by your side. And now I'm not with you. Now you're with her. Don't ask me for forgiveness anymore. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, but not now. For now, goodbye." The divorce was inevitable. Evelyn had put off this step for a long time, hoping the pain would subside, that maybe she could forgive Jackson, but time only put everything in its place. Meetings with Jackson were rare and brief, only to settle formalities. He looked older, tired, spoke little, sometimes tried to talk about the past, but Evelyn immediately cut off these attempts. She didn't want to return to what had long since died. On the day they signed the papers, Evelyn didn't feel relief, but a strange emptiness. She left the courthouse, breathed in the cool air, and suddenly realized. Now she was truly free. Not from Jackson, but from her old self, from expectations, from the fear of being alone. She walked down the street, not knowing where she was going, and for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to just walk, not thinking about tomorrow. The first weeks after the divorce were not easy. Evelyn was learning to live anew. She rearranged the furniture in her apartment, threw out old things that reminded her of her past life, and painted the living room walls a light color. Every evening she lit candles, played her favorite music, and allowed herself to simply be, without rushing, without obligations, without worrying about what others thought. She spent more time with her daughter and granddaughter. Her daughter often came over on weekends. They cooked dinner together, watched old movies, and discussed the news. Her granddaughter brought joy and laughter into the house, and Evelyn felt she had someone to live for. She signed up for painting classes she had long dreamed of, started reading books she'd put off for years, and even tried yoga. Sometimes in the evenings, Evelyn caught herself thinking about Jackson. Not with pain, not with resentment, more with a gentle sadness. She understood that their story was over, that she hadn't been able to forgive him, but she didn't want to hate him either. She let him go from her life like letting a bird out of a cage, with gratitude for all the good that had been, and with a firm decision never to return to the past. One day, as spring was just beginning, Evelyn's daughter came to visit. She was excited, her eyes shining with joy. "Mom, I have an idea," she said, barely stepping through the door. "Let's go on a trip. Just you, me, and your granddaughter. We all need this, a change of scenery, to see something new, just to relax." Evelyn was surprised. She hadn't been on vacation in many years, always putting off trips because of work, family responsibilities, or simply not being in the mood. But now, looking at her daughter's radiant face, she suddenly felt that she really did want to change. "Where do you want to go?" she asked. "I found a tour of historic towns. There'll be a bus, excursions, beautiful places, new people." "Let's go, Mom." Her daughter took her hand just like in childhood, and Evelyn couldn't refuse. Packing went quickly. Evelyn was surprised to find she enjoyed picking out clothes, packing her suitcase, and buying guidebooks. She felt young, full of anticipation and excitement for something good. On the day of departure, she, her daughter, and granddaughter boarded the bus, and for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt a flutter of excitement, like in her youth when everything was ahead. The trip turned out to be a real celebration. They passed through small towns, admired ancient churches, strolled along narrow streets, and ate ice cream on park benches. Her granddaughter was delighted by everything new. Her daughter took pictures of every detail, and Evelyn simply enjoyed the moment. She found herself smiling at strangers, laughing at the guide's jokes, and listening with interest to stories about old castles and legends. One day, when the group stopped in a small town on the riverbank, Evelyn decided to take a walk alone. She walked along the embankment, listened to the seagulls, and breathed in the fresh air. Suddenly, a man stopped nearby, tall, with gray at his temples, wearing a light jacket and with kind eyes. "Excuse me, do you know where I can get a coffee around here?" he asked, smiling. Evelyn pointed to a small cafe by the water. "They have great coffee and delicious pastries," she said. "Thank you." The man smiled even wider. "Would you mind joining me? I'm here for the first time, and drinking coffee alone is boring." Evelyn hesitated for a second but then decided, why not? They sat at a table by the window, ordered coffee and pastries. The man's name was Jacob. He was a widower, traveling alone to get away from work and routine. The conversation flowed easily. They talked about the towns they'd visited, shared impressions, and laughed at funny incidents from the trip. Jacob was an attentive conversationalist, a good listener, never interrupted, and sometimes joked, and Evelyn felt surprisingly at ease with him. She told him about her daughter, her granddaughter, and how she hadn't allowed herself to simply relax and enjoy life for a long time. Jacob shared his own stories, how after his wife's death he couldn't recover for a long time, how one day he realized that life goes on, and decided to try something new. They walked around the town, visited souvenir shops, and took photos in front of old houses. Jacob bought Evelyn a small heart-shaped pendant and said, "Let this be a reminder that life always gives us a chance for happiness." That evening, returning to the hotel, Evelyn felt elated. She wasn't making plans, wasn't thinking about the future, just enjoying the moment. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to be a woman, not just a mother, grandmother, or ex-wife. In the following days, she and Jacob often walked together, discussed excursions, and shared impressions. Her daughter watched her mother with a smile, and her granddaughter quickly became friends with Jacob, who knew how to tell funny stories and perform magic tricks. The trip was coming to an end. On the last evening, the group gathered in a restaurant for a farewell dinner. Jacob invited Evelyn to a slow dance. She was shy at first but then agreed. To soft music they danced around the hall, and Evelyn suddenly felt that the past no longer held her. She was free, for new meetings, new feelings, a new life. When the bus was heading home, Jacob sat next to Evelyn. They were silent for a long time, just looking out the window, holding hands. Jacob quietly said, "I'm glad I met you. I hope this isn't the end, but just the beginning." Evelyn smiled. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was sure. Now she wasn't afraid of change. She believed in herself again, in life, in the fact that happiness is possible at any age and after any trial. Returning home, Evelyn couldn't sleep for a long time. She replayed the moments of the trip in her mind, remembered Jacob's smile, his kind words, the ease with which they communicated. She realized she was ready to move forward, to open new horizons for herself without looking back. Life often puts us in front of difficult choices. Evelyn's story is one of betrayal, pain, forgiveness, and new hope. Any of us could find ourselves in her place, facing disappointment, losing faith in ourselves, and then step by step learning to live again. Should you forgive infidelity or not? Everyone has their own answer. Some believe that betrayal can never be forgotten, while others find the strength to let go of resentment and start over. The most important thing is not to lose yourself, not to let the past control your future, and to remember, happiness is possible even after the hardest trials. And what about you? Would you be able to forgive betrayal, or would you prefer to move on with your life? Please write in the comments what you think about this story, and what you would do in Evelyn's place. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more interesting and real-life stories ahead.